Good day, everyone. My name is Dalen, and I'll be your host for today. And we have a very special guest with us today who is going to share with us more about his career working in startups and gradually growing up with the startup for the last 6 years and becoming a product design manager in the startup itself. So today we have Ashraf Johari with us from Circles.life, or Circles. It's now changed its name to Circles to keep things simple. And tonight we are going to be discussing about his lessons transitioning from an individual contributor to a team manager, as well as how he chose a career and a culture that demands excellence, nothing but excellence, because that's what startups are. And they're disrupting the status quo. And he's also scaling his design team in the ASEAN region, which is the rest of Southeast Asia. So if you're dialing in, if you're here with us and listening in, please give us a like, please give us like a comment, let us know that you're with us, those of you who are dialing in and listening in from Southeast Asia. And he also advocates for people to work in startups versus anywhere else in any other types of companies, because he's going to say, yeah, that's where I grew up and that's where I grew the most. So with that, let me briefly introduce Ashraf, who is currently the product design manager at Circles, which is a telco software as a service company. He has 10 years of experience in digital design, and he is very passionate about building great products as well as mentoring growing design teams. Outside of work, Ashraf enjoys the occasional traveling, discovering new music, and supporting his favorite football team, which is Liverpool Football Club. Okay, welcome to the show, Ashraf.
Hey, Dylan. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I mean, thanks for the really nice intro.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, so Dylan and I we met at like a event in Singapore. I think we're both based in Singapore, by the way.
Yes.
So he just sort of like reached out and said, "Hey, like, do you want to be part of my you want to be part of a podcast that I'm doing?" So I was like, "Oh yeah, this is cool. I think I myself have not really been, I mean, I've listened to and consumed a lot of podcasts, but never really have been sort of like in a hot seat. So I'm also really excited to be here to share about my journey.
Mm,
And yeah, and lovely meeting all of you as well online. So wherever
lovely.
you are, in the world. So glad everyone's here.
Okay,
And yeah,
great. So,
hmm,
Ashraf, let's start with the first question. Why startups?
yes.
Why join a startup? What's your pitch?
What's my pitch? I think why startups? I think it really, I would say, okay, so I'm like, I like to, I think in a startup world, right? I think especially if you are sort of finding a footing into like the design world, or like maybe you're a newer designer, it really helps you. It will help you shape into like who you are, and that was actually like a very strong why as to why I wanted to join. It's like a startup. So I was the story goes that it was pretty early in my career. That was like maybe like 7 8 years back. I was actually working in an agency, right? So I was already sort of gotten used to that whole. I was already sort of finding my footing in the design industry as like a graphic designer, a visual designer primarily. But I wanted to move into product design, so or UI UX. It was more so-called traditionally known back then. And I've heard a lot of things about like, okay, if you wanna really try to grow. I was speaking to some people, and it's like maybe it's better to join maybe a startup where you get to learn a lot of things. You get to sort of dive really deep. You really get to throw yourself into the fire. But at the same time, yeah, you really will grow a lot because you get to try out a lot of different things. So that was a very appealing, it's a very appealing scenario for me. when I was first starting out. Um,
Mm,
yeah, there were like I was fortunately for me at that point in time, I was weighing several options between like startups and some bigger companies. But I decided to actually go with a startup because I thought like when I talk to people outside, I talk to my friends and stuff like that. Um, the what pulls me in also was the fact that startup in any kind of startups, right? The situation is a lot more dynamic, and if you're high energy, if you really wanna really want to grow, I think that is sort of like one of the best ways that you can do it. So that was the reason why I joined Circles at a point in time where there was we were at that point in time was still like a very messy startup sort of culture, and I sort of enjoy it. Like oh, this is
yeah.
a lot of people say it's super messy, but I kind of find myself at home,
Mm,
because of
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I can certainly relate to that. I think some people really enjoy it. And there is a saying like 1 year in the startup is like 2 to 3 years like anywhere else in the world. And I can certainly relate that back to my experience working for Razer.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, what do you think? Does Circles feel like 1 year in Circles is like 3 years elsewhere?
Yeah, it kind of does. On the not so good days, like you tend to get that feeling. But if you're doing it with the right people, I think it doesn't really matter. So like
Yeah.
a lot what I found also particularly enjoyable is not about just I mean being a startup, maybe it's all the idea back then. It sounded pretty cool, but I think what I enjoyed was really working with the people that I found myself working with.
Mm,
um there were a lot of people who are like-minded, who are really hungry, who really wants to have a dig at a problem,
mm,
and who are willing to put in like the hours, the time to really try to do something, or to solve some problems that they were facing with.
yeah.
So that was working with those like-minded people was also part of it adds to the whole joy of working in that and kind of stuff in the startup
Mm.
environment.
So just to kind of summarize what you just said, it's the camaraderie that you mentioned. It's also about your own personal growth. Um,
Mhm.
and anything else, like any other reasons why someone who's just entering the industry or is thinking about switching jobs should consider startups.
Um, it is about, I think, if you're switching industries or if you're new into design, it really helps you hone your craft. I think most importantly as a designer.
Mm,
But one thing, but you always inevitably have to learn it the hard way, wherein like you may sort of find yourself in a lot of position where okay, maybe you are a bit more junior, but you have to own certain things that maybe at that point in time you feel like, hey, um, what am I
mm.
supposed to do with this? Like maybe I do not have much
They're kind of
guidance,
like
and
yeah, kind
yeah,
of like
mentorship.
punching above your weight
Yeah,
class.
you find yourself having to punch above the weight, yeah, your weight a lot.
Mm, mm, mm,
And sometimes you may not even get enough like guidance from either your peers or your manager or things like this. But that also will sort of push you to actually sort of figure out things more on your own. I mean, of course, you can look across to your team members and all that, the peers that you're working with, on a daily basis. But even as a designer yourself, when sometimes even if you're the only designer in the team, you'll find means and ways to actually, you know, uh, to hone your craft like even further. And it also, I think it comes with going through that pain, so that is sort of that's also one thing that I would say that helps, as when I first joined Circles. Yeah.
yeah, that's excellent. So I have a lot of respect for what Circles does because
Ah,
technically it's
thank you.
not a telco because it doesn't have a telco license, but it wrote on one of the existing telcos, and I remember vividly how you guys launched by actually giving more data back to customers and consumer. And I was, for a period of time, a Circles customer for a number of years, and was really impressed by how much your team actually builds communities and change the industry and influence the industry here in Singapore somewhat by
Mm.
getting the industry to pay more attention to what actually customers want. Yeah, so very curious, like your role in the early days in shaping all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, at that point in time, when I joined like Circles, we were maybe around, maybe we were, I would say maybe 2 years, in
Mm,
our operation, second year of our operations in Singapore.
hmm
When I first joined Circles at that point in time, the brand was actually one of the interesting one of the reasons why I joined Circles was in the fact that I was really a customer of Circles, and I was really a
mm,
customer of Circles because and you don't hear this often, coming from like about a telco brand, but I was actually very impressed by a telco brand, right? You
mm,
can be impressed by a lot of different brands from different industries, but like if I look now and when I look at it in retrospect, like the fact that you know a person or an individual can be bought into or buy switch to a circles to switch to circles because of the brand, right? It does say a lot about like the success of circles, at the start when you were trying to again punch above our weight. So how do we sort of make an impact, make a dent in the market, right? We became at that point in time we were very brand led. We'll do like crazy marketing stunts, make them viral and all that things. Well, all those things. So all those things help. At that point in time, I've not joined it, but I was aware enough of the things that they were doing that I was like, hey, this is a cool brand to be part of. So I became a customer. And then I was like,
mm.
when I found an opportunity to work with Circles, I really wanted to because I mean, I fundamentally want to work for a company of which I'm a customer of, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons also as to why I joined Circles. But yeah, at that point in time after I joined, we were very much like still leveraging on the strength of the brand, right, and the strength of the community. So what we did, in those days, pre-COVID, we do engage a lot with like the community that we built. It was called uh, I forgot the name. Oh my gosh.
No
Yeah, but
worries about it. Yeah.
Facebook community, right?
Yes,
there
I
was
remember that. I got a free plushie, the
yeah,
donut. I got a free donut
yeah.
from it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. I think yeah, we still have those a lot of those donuts in the office,
Oh,
by the
that's
way.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So, mhm.
one of the reasons why we want what we feel like community engagement, and especially like engaging with those who believed in us at the very start was very important, to keep the brand strong, to really understand like, hey, to get direct feedback as well, because were our supporters from day one as well. So there was a lot
Mm,
of community engagement, even like when we were like testing some like new features, or we are building, designing some new features. The first group of feedback that we always get from is are those yes, it's called the inner circle. Yeah, the inner circle. So yeah, I remember
yeah,
now. The
that
name, the
rings a
group, or
bell now, for sure.
the group was
Yeah.
called Inner Circle. So we
Sounds
usually
very exclusive,
will
the inner circle.
contact, yeah, the Inner Circle to get like customer feedback and for new features or things that we're testing out. So that was interesting because it's like we already have a group of people who are ready, who are enthusiastic about testing, all these things. So we can always, it was a little bit easier for us to start up, like user testing or like focus group discussions and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And also there was the point in time where when I joined, we were starting our launch into Australia. As Circles
Mm,
Live Australia, our sorry, our third market, the second of which was Taiwan. So
Mm,
I was involved for the Australia launch, where we had to basically translate the, I would say, 70 or 80% of the Singapore product or the experience into the Australian market. So that was my first foray into launching in a new market. And if you
mm,
try to put things into perspective, like the fact that I was more of like at that point in time, a junior designer, and I was thrown into this whole launching of a new market. So that there was still at that point in time, I was like, you feel a bit of just
yeah. Trial by fire, right?
just join. I'm expected to do all these kind of things.
Yeah.
So that's really the true meaning of like, throwing you into the deep end and expecting you to float. So I had that experience very early on, but when I look back, thankfully that was one of the key drivers of my growth in the company as well. Yeah,
So I'm going to ask you to elaborate on a few things, but let me first
yeah.
start with a question. Like
Mm,
you had this community called Inner Circle, which you
yeah.
gathered customer feedback and you did user testing. How how did having that community or how did having that group of people like transform the way you guys build products or like shape the decisions? Like, did it help shape any like important product decisions you guys made?
Mm, I think we I wouldn't say we do of course leverage on them a lot,
Mm,
on,
mm,
on some groups for feedback and stuff like that. But I think we are also wary of the fact that we do not want to rely on them 100% because it will create an
mm,
echo chamber, because these are supporters, these are like
mm,
promoters of our product, right? When we do
mm,
our user testing, the right thing to do is also test it with like, with
non-supporters. Yeah,
non-supporters,
yeah.
non-promoters, or even like basically people on other telco services as well, right? Because we want to
Mm,
ask them, hey, what's your propensity to switch if we were to introduce this new feature, right? What's the likeliness will you switch to Circles Live and stuff like that? So we need to make sure that like we have like where we do testing, we'll validate with different groups of users. I would
mm,
say that because like these people they are very much invested uh you know in Circles, as a brand. They are really like very strong supporters. The kind of insights they will get from them, they will be like more primarily like it will be like, hey, we
yeah.
would love it if you do
Mm,
this or do that, because
mm,
they also have because they are more invested, they will have more, I would say, more detailed idea or more enthusiastic about idea of how things should be. If we catch them in saying that, hey, we would love it if you do this or if you
mm,
try this, then that's a feedback that we really take it, right? Because it would mean that they would really want it. So we'll use most of those feedback from them to see what else that we can do, right?
mm.
But of course, yes, when it comes to like user testing and all that, it has to be a balance. We have to test with all different types of both users and of non-users of Circles. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think there were when I remember when I was there in the inner circle, like you guys were trying to launch like quiz functions and stuff like that, just to see if customers would respond to micro surveys or questions. I thought
Mm,
that was interesting that you guys were experimenting with that because I didn't see any telco doing that. Um, so you launch in Australia. That's said to be quite a very, very different market, and very, very much higher in terms of expectations as well. So I'm wondering
yep.
what are some of the lessons you took away launching in a new market like Australia, especially from the design perspective.
Mm. Yeah, I think I would say that Australians are very opinionated.
Mm,
Um, and you better mean what you say, right? So I think when we do design, or I think when we write, for example, right, we have to be honest, I would say, And we have to
Mm,
be straightforward and honest in what we are providing,
mm,
right? There's a lot of also regulatory overhead that we have to contend with. So when it
mm,
comes to design, coming from, I guess in Southeast Asia, you know, the less info that you have, the better it is, because I think we just don't like to read. We want to get things done quickly,
mm,
right?
mm,
But Australians users, they nitpick a lot, right? So even if you're designing things like your one of the bread and butter of one of the bread and butter items, or component or UI, whatever that you want to call it in the telco world, is basically your what we call a plan card, right? Where you display the product the plan or the price that you're selling at, how many GBs for how many dollars, along with all the features and all the TNCs and all that. So that's what we call like a plan card. Like in
mm,
Australia, you have to consider a lot of space, a lot of things for terms and conditions, because this will all be um, carefully looked at, not just by your regulators, but also by the consumers themselves, right?
mm,
They are a lot more, how to say, there are a lot more nuance. They will look into like the fine print. So I think that in itself will challenge you quite a fair bit, I would say, in terms of like how to design it best for like either readability, or to make sure that you don't leave any info hidden and all that, because they will look out for all these kind of things, and they will call you out for it, right?
yeah,
So that was
that's
something that's very interesting between designing for a Singapore market, where you can be a lot more info light, versus in designing for an Australian market, where users are expecting you to be honest and transparent with the info that you're providing.
that's a really good tip and
Yeah.
one to bear in mind, especially if you're building for the Australian market. And knowing that Circles is also operating in Taiwan and expanding to the rest of Southeast Asia, and I know you have team members here in this region, in the ASEAN region as well. Can you
Mm.
talk a little bit about your experience skilling in ASEAN? What's the, maybe let's start with like the talent. Yeah, like the level of talent. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So for level of talent, I would say that I'm for one, I'm very happy to see a lot of design talents coming out of ASEAN,
Mm,
right? So especially like so recently, one of our latest projects, we are launching into Indonesia via our SaaS product.
mm,
So one of my responsibilities is to hire a local team to help build this product with us, right?
mm,
So, and you can see the talent are really you can see the amount of talent that are coming out of like Indonesia, for
mm,
example. And they are, and they are as attuned to good design as any good designer, that I've met, right? So maybe they are not getting as much exposure as maybe a Singaporean designer. Maybe we're more privileged or more well connected with like other regions around the world, for example, right? But I do see a lot of very good talent coming out of like the ASEAN region. Um, Coming out of I've worked with several in really very good Indonesian designers. There are I've worked with also like Filipino designers as well, right? So they are also good, really really good talent coming out from their side. And one thing that I'm particularly impressed with, like those with ASEAN designers, or maybe those who I work with, is their level of craft and technical competency. And they just like, for example, I realized like Indonesian designers, and maybe this is just from my, I mean, this is of course just sharing from my experience, right? But Indonesian designers, Filipino designers, they are very much, they are, they know how to make things look good,
Mm,
a lot of them have like actually like graphic design background, a lot of them transition from there, and they have a very good understanding of like creating visual designs that work. Um, if you see a lot of like Indonesian products, for example, like your Gojeks and your Tokopedia or like and things like this, they do have a lot of very dynamic visually led experiences, in their product. And I
mm,
think that helps quite a fair bit when I'm getting my designers into design for a B2C product, because they are a little bit more visually led, so they can actually bring a brand to life. So that was one thing that I sort of am very appreciative for. Same goes for the Philippine designers that I've worked with. They're also very much very good with their craft, especially on the UI part of things. Yeah, so that
yeah.
was what I found interesting.
That's really good to hear because Armenia is a very big market. So there's a lot of different types of talent.
Mm.
Um, do you have any tips for companies or teams who are trying to hire the best designers in these markets? Do you have any tips like how to work best with them or how to attract the right talent to work with their teams?
Mm, yeah, I think I would say I would say it depends on the needs of the team, right? I would say that I will still try to look more um for me, because like the team has grown to a size that I can start focusing on a little bit more of like specialization, right?
Mm,
So, for example, if I find there are several gaps in the team that needs filling, I will specifically look for a person or a talent who can fill up that role, right? So I can I'm currently we're at this stage of growth where I can look for someone who's more specialized in maybe UI design, for example, or design systems, for example, right? And I will sort of try to find my talent accordingly. Um, as one thing I would say also, and I think maybe this is just something to take note of for um English competency, I would say, is still a must, right, in our region, right? Because we do not in ASEAN, as you would know, there's no common language, right? So most of us will speak English to each other, right? But thankfully, a lot of like the talents here are also like effectively bilingual.
mm,
But that is just something that maybe, as if you're a manager, if you're a hiring manager, this is something that you need to, I would say, consider a little bit more deeply, because
mm.
some of these talents coming out of this region, because English is clearly not, it's obviously not their first language, so it's something that you need to also consider, because a lot of work is,
Yeah,
work is success to work in is basically, it's just all about communication, right? So that is
100%.
something that is something that you need to really make sure that your talent
So
is able to do that, right? Because
yes.
there may be
Mm,
that I came across like a lot of times where uh when you say one thing, they may understand this as another, right? So you may find yourself putting in a little bit more effort, I would say, to communicate certain points, certain things, but that's part and parcel of the job.
since
Working
we're
with people here. Yeah.
Yeah, since we're talking about scaling design teams, like, and I know you hire quite broadly and quite widely across the region, do you have a favorite question that you like to ask, and why do you ask that during the interview? Or it could be something that you do during interview as well.
Mm. Um.
I recognize this is a bit
Usually,
impromptu. This is a bit
usually,
impromptu.
yeah, yeah, it is impromptu, right? So
Yeah.
when I do my interviews, there's a lot of I check a lot for what you call vibes. I do a lot of vibe check, right? So
Oh, that's interesting. Can you
yeah,
elaborate what you mean by that?
because I mean, this the people that I'm getting in, these are the people that you want to that you would want ultimately you have to work together on a day-to-day basis.
Mm,
So vibe is more important than anything else, right? If I'm getting a
mm,
designer, I will resume and portfolio. Of course, I can assess and get a good assessment within like 5 minutes, right? I
mm,
know
mm,
exactly what I'm looking for. I know the
mm,
skills that you have, you know. But most of the
mm.
time when I'm doing the interview, again, I'm not. I'm trying to get to your answer, but I'm just sort of trying to set the
Yeah,
context for it.
sure.
Um, a lot of my interviews are very conversational, and I like
Mm,
to ask questions. I like to know more about them, like outside of who you are as a designer,
yeah.
right? What do you like to read? What do you like to like listen to? What do you like to watch? And stuff like that.
Mm,
Because I think the reason why I ask also is like designers need to get the inspiration from outside of design as well, right?
mm,
And most of it, most of the time, like outside of our work, that's what we do. We don't focus. I mean, at least for me, I'm not. I love design, but outside of work, I like to consume other things as well. And that
mm.
sometimes when you're looking at something, you're reading, you're watching, or you're listening, you know, you get something out of it. You get something, you get some insight. Hey, maybe this can be applied to what I do,
Yeah.
right? So I like to find out more about the for the interviewees. I like to find out about what they like to do, like outside of work, outside of design.
Yeah,
So
that makes
that gives
sense.
me, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because it's yeah, it's kind of like back when I was working in advertising, they may bring you out for drinks as part of the interview process.
Mhm.
It's also a vibe check in some way. Yeah. So do they all need to support your favorite football team, which is
That would be
Liverpool?
a big plus, but I'll never say
Okay.
no, but like, yeah, I mean, like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
there'll be a big plus, but again, I'm just kidding. It doesn't have to be.
No worries.
I've
I
I've
I'm
I've,
I'm
I've
I'm
worked
just
with
pulling your leg too.
I've worked with people who are like like just from rival fans, and
Mm,
like I mean, there's still a lot of them are still my friends, but we'll banter every day
yeah.
about football. It helps also.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I think a team that can really gel together can work together in a very intense environment for a very very long time. And I think that's also very important when you say vibe check. Um, so I know Circles um is a company of different colors, right? And I say that like it has its moments where I heard like it's very very intense. It's a culture that also demands excellence, and there's a bit of chaos since it's a bit of a startup as well. So
Mm.
I'm wondering, um, as generally startups demand a lot out of its people, right? And how do you manage that as someone who is trying to strike a balance and, as you said, not just be 100% at work, but also explore other interests. Yeah.
Mm. Um, I think at the start I was actually very bad at managing that aspect, balancing between, I mean, navigating the chaos, and
Mm,
managing the chaos. So,
mm,
like, I thought that, you know, to rise above the chaos means at that point in time when I was younger and I was a lot more naive, I just thought that, like, in order to strive through the chaos, you just got to do everything, you know? And maybe that works for me at the start because, like, I had, I guess, a lot of energy, a lot of motivation. I had maybe good support. I had good support structures, fortunately, as well. In the team. So, and that was what I thought. Like, hey, do everything. You know, make sure that you push through. Just hustle all the way
mm,
through. you know. And why I say that that was sort of something, and why I say that like that was not really the best thing to do was like is because of like now, like how do I sort of right now when I look back and I say that hey, maybe that's not the best thing to do, right? In order to manage all this chaos, you need to learn first of all, you need first of all you need to learn how to push back. You need to learn how to say no. You need to learn how to prioritize, right? So as I grew, in the company, I got better at doing that, and that also helps me to actually be better and actually to produce work with more quality once I learn how to uh prioritize, once I learn how to understand um the the real problems at hand, the real problems to solve for, and not to basically do everything, right?
Mm,
And that was the learning that I had, as I grew the company, and especially as I started to um grow a team, to manage a team. So that was what I learned
yeah.
after, right?
So,
um
mm,
yeah.
so since you said excellence is not just about working harder, and
Mm,
pushing through and hustling, what does excellence mean then? Like, what does building a culture of excellence mean to you?
mm,
Yeah.
mm. I would say that like right now because I have a responsibility of like growing and mentoring people right now. And I think like first of all, I think for excellence, I mean building a culture of excellence means you have to first empower people, right? You have to empower people, not just of course not just your team members, but others as well, right? People around you, people that you're working with, your product managers, your engineers, and things like this. You have creating a culture of excellence means you have to empower everyone to be able to do the best that they can, right? So when I talk about empowering the team, it's all about making sure that you build a culture of trust. Building a culture of trust means that you will not you will stop, or you prevent yourself from micromanaging, right? You can present them with like a problem statement, or like with the junior designers, you give them like maybe a brief and let them know, hey, like, hey, this is why not you try to take a stab at it, but let them know that you'll be there to support them in case, if support is needed, right?
Mm, yeah, that's really good.
So
And
that, yeah.
what about, so it really sounds like it's kind of like giving them a certain level of autonomy and building
Mm,
that culture of trust and
yeah,
being able to push them a little bit further than they are comfortable with.
yeah,
Just like how you grew up with the company where people pushed you a little bit
yeah,
harder and
and
stretch you more. Yeah.
exactly. And like and this is something that I need to repay in kind, right? Because like I realized that the reason why I have a lot of autonomy and being able to take ownership is because my my manager like give me the space to do so,
Mm,
right? Right. She doesn't micromanage. She encouraged me to like take ownership, and because of that, I felt empowered. Now,
mm,
so that was, and because I found sort of relative success with that approach, that was something that I feel like that is a model that is definitely working, and it's something that I need to try, and I need to sort of propagate, right, for the rest
yeah.
of the team that I'm building. Yeah.
I
So that
love that.
was, yeah.
Yeah. I really love that. I mean, leadership is the gift that keeps giving, isn't it?
Mm,
Like, especially if you experience good leadership, then it propagates and I hope like through you, it propagates to your team, and it'll propagate to maybe their own team members moving forward. And I think this is also quite a nice transition, talking about how you evolve from being an individual contributor to a team manager. You mentioned a lot of what you do these days is mentoring, it's coaching. Um, I'm wondering what are some of the things that maybe you would have done or differently, maybe in your initial years, transitioning from an IC to a team manager?
Mm. Um, I would say that the transition part was a pretty challenging part of my career at that point in time in circles.
Mm,
Because you have to learn how to let go, right? From an IC, it's right. For example, if you're so as an IC, you can take ownership, you can and you should take credit for the work that you do. It's right. But when you transition to a manager, like for myself, it's like how do you make sure that you are how do you sort of take a backseat and allow your team members to shine? How do you make sure that you are delegating effectively as well? So the transition was also something difficult from there was a challenge for me to so there was a mindset shift from an IC to then a manager. I found myself like maybe micromanaging a little bit at that point in time because I felt like hey maybe the standards are maybe to my eyes were not good enough or something like that. So that's I thought that maybe I should step in, but it is not about really stepping in and trying to take over things, right? It's more about just sort of you take a step back, you try to understand, hey, what are some of the avenues for help? What are some of the avenues that you can sort of help with for for maybe a designer who's maybe struggling and stuff like that, and try to help from that aspect. But don't try to sort of step in and solve problems for the person also. So that what I could have done better was of course not to was to understand I mean was to have that understanding or to maybe manage that mindset shift
mm.
better from an IC to
Yeah,
a manager.
I think it's always a growth process, right? That no one gets it right the first time, and you learn through trial and error, and you learn through experience that you become better managers, and hopefully the mistakes are not so bad to the extent that it costs you your career. So I think overall you probably did well because you stayed
Yeah,
on and now you're managing an even bigger team for
I
yourself.
would I would say another thing though, like at that point in time, I think um what I think another thing that I would have done also better is to now that the time I was like talking about the transition from like IC to manager and how I could have handled that better because it was my first time anyway. But I would say that like I don't know, maybe like I mean it's just a thought that came to my mind, right? Like maybe I could have maybe staying on as an IC a little bit more was also kind of could be helpful, right? Because Circles was growing at such a fast pace, and there was an I guess like your growth you do grow exponentially, right? Like but sometimes when you grow, there are some things that tends to get left behind or deprioritized in terms of your skill sets, in terms of the things that you take with you, right? As you grow into like a more managerial role, right? So maybe case in point, like your craft as a designer, your technical competency, right? Because
Mm,
those are just some things like as those are some things as a manager, you focus a lot less on that because you execute way less, right?
mm,
Um, what would have what would have been helpful is that maybe at that point in time, I could have like maybe polished my skills, my technical competencies to be at a level where I say that okay, this is maybe good enough, or maybe it's like so that I can provide more constructive feedback to someone who's more junior sort of later on, right? But
mm,
I sort of realized that, and how I sort of circumvent it is to just continue learning. Just we have our tools, all our tools at hand, right? So if you have, if I have like a bit more free time, I'll just, or if I have a bit more time, or even at work, if there's some little sort of things that I can help with from an executional perspective, I'll still try to dabble in it, right? So just to keep um that skills fresh, right? Because I think tools is using tools, in the design world is still very much a core competency, I would say, right? And keeping up to date with them, especially in this new age of like AI software and tools like this, right? You gotta keep up as much as possible as well. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think you're being very humble to really share with us your stories and of what you felt could have been done better. And that's really great to hear that even like for someone like yourself, where you shortcut your growth process, you still felt like, hey, I could have done more. I'm very curious, like these days you're operating as a product design manager. Like, how do you know or how do you tell if someone's ready to get to the next level or become a leader or a team lead themselves?
Mm. Um, I think you gotta first sort of you gotta identify, I would say, like you gotta identify the potential, right? Like and how I see potential is like in how the person, like if a person is able to sort of if I can see this, the person is a lot more, it's not shy. For example, in like being, it's not shy in the room or in a meeting or presenting ideas and stuff like that, or able to lead conversations, right? I see, like I think that is someone that I would want to help to move to the next level. Because when you move to the next level as a designer, it's not just your craft speaking, right? Is you have to be the one telling the story. You have to be the one setting the narrative. You have to be the one communicating with stakeholders, your upward stakeholders, your across stakeholders, and stuff like that. So the more I see like a designer being able to hold their ground, being able to defend, being able to tell a better story in their work, in their design, those are the ones that I see. Those are the ones that I see has potential to move on to the next level primarily.
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And we have a question from the audience over here. So the context is, I believe, around trying to convince stakeholders or even a fellow colleague that UX is more important than UI. Uh, so yeah, do you have any advice or any tips to convince a colleague that we should pay attention to user experience and not just user interface? Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a classic question on that all of us designers has to contend with. I think within the context of your business, right? You have to explain the best way to explain, I would say, is to explain why UX is important in the context of the business that you're in, right? We have to fundamentally, okay, so I work in a company whose goal is to make money, right? Or profit company, right? So I have to explain to my stakeholders on why UX is important to drive certain metrics for the company, right? What will be for example, like I need to explain why reducing the number of steps, not increasing the number of steps, will then lead to a higher conversion rate for your product, right? So that is a better UX from the perspective of of circles of my company, right? So I'll start with that probably. And of course, better UX is universally known as like you do not want to create frustrations, right? So there's no point in having a user navigate a beautiful UI, but but them leaving the experience having them have a very bad experience because of clunky UX. You wouldn't want that as well, right? So UX is always the more important thing to sort out, and I think UX is something that not it's not just an ownership. I mean, it's not just something that the designer should own, but it's sort of like a mindset that I think everyone, within your business should also sort of um, advocate for. Um, if everyone has a common understanding of what good UX means in the context of your business, then that's like half the battle won. And then you can start talking about how do we then make things look good, right? So that is also that's what I would say.
Yeah, I hope that answers the audience question. And we're almost towards the end of our session. So just kind of to wrap things up a little bit, um, we're navigating through a very interesting time, I would say, in the industry. There's a lot of tech layoffs. We're looking at Gen AI and how that's sort of accelerating the product development process. And there's just a lot of disruption. There's even talks about an oncoming recession. I'm just wondering, like, for someone who's been in the industry for a while, do you have any advice or for people who are trying to enter the industry right now or trying or still on the lookout for a job or work um, in this country or around the region? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Advice on this is like okay. So I don't think okay. So I wouldn't start with an advice, but I empathize with um with people who are sort of going through this, I would say, difficult period, right? Especially in the design industry, and even it's not just in design, right? In the product as well, and then the overall tech industry as well, right? And I think I do empathize with people who are trying their best to look out for all these new opportunities. Um, but I think try to build, try to understand deeply about maybe your it is not advice, right? But I would say try to really find out about more about who you are as a person. What do you really like to do, right? What are you really sort of passionate about, perhaps, and maybe that, or what do you really feel strongly about, and then maybe sort of use that to build a brand um for yourself to sort of stand out from the others,
Hmm.
right? I would say that is one thing. Um, Uh, yeah. So I think, well, I don't know. I would just say I empathize with the situation. I know that it's difficult.
Yeah.
Um, but just soldier on, I guess.
Soldier on.
Yeah.
How did you perhaps like if you could share from your own personal experience, how did you figure that out for yourself?
Um, how do I figure that out for myself? You mean like at the point when I'm looking for like
Yeah.
a job, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, like you know, when I was looking for a job, um, I try to focus a lot of my energy on just like trying to find a job, right? So I sort of I don't beat myself up for like feeling, or if let's say I get rejected right during the interview process and stuff like that, because this is part and parcel of the job hunting. I try to basically at that point in time I try to cast a wide net, right? And really try to focus most if not all of my energy within in terms of to secure a new job. And and I made sure that like I try to build uh my, especially for designers, right, your portfolio to the best that I can. I tried I use that opportunity to also like maybe upskill uh my craft, my design skills as well when I'm designing that portfolio as well. And I also, I try to like whenever I get like uh an interview, I'll try to, read up or prepare as much as possible. With the company that I'm interviewing with, I'll try to um uh I'll try to understand the company as much as possible so that I can sort of uh leverage the conversation in a way that that it works for me to show that I understand, okay, the problems that you're trying to solve for, and basically try to position myself as the designer who can help to solve that problem for that company. So I tried that. So that was basically some of the things that I do when I say that when I say I was like sort of redirecting a lot of my energy to just make sure that I get the job right. So um, yeah, so that was something that I did over a course of like maybe 3 or 4 months before I, finally landed a job at Circles. And yeah,
Yeah.
I
Thank you for
just tried to
sharing.
build that mental resilience along the way. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your thought process behind that. And as a final question from the audience, someone asked, are there any tools that you're paying attention to more lately, especially if they are Gen AI related? Yeah,
I
as a product
am
design manager. Yeah.
um I'm interested in build. I mean, um, right now I have sort of like starting a side challenge to really update my very outdated portfolio. So
Mm,
I'm trying Lovable right now, um,
mm,
across different things, not just Lovable, but I'm trying to start like all the way from framing. So I do a lot. I try to basically think of a workflow that I can try to integrate different AI tools into creating a polished portfolio website for myself. Like of course I will start with like my chat GPT and all that, but create I will try different like no code tools probably, like Lovable to see what I can do. I'm also about to try Bolt as well. Those are the two things that I'm sort of looking at to build like basically polish, ready to ship kind of website. So still in the very early stages of like exploration right now.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good time to be a builder, I would say.
yeah, it
Uh,
is. It is. Yeah,
yeah, it's really fun to play with those tools. I'm personally playing with Cursor myself, built some apps, some games for my daughter to play on, without
yeah,
actually knowing a single line of code. So I think it's a really, really interesting time to just be building and be building a lot faster.
yeah.
Very excited to see what Canva or Figma or even maybe Adobe might come up with next.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, with that, thank you so much, Ashraf, for being on our show and sharing your experiences from being a designer and then gradually growing up with the startup that you're with, and now becoming a product design manager, and even switching or learning new skills in that process, and taking and sharing with us your very reflective journey and how you evolve as a person. Uh, Definitely wishing you all the best with your career as Circles grow. We were just speaking before the webinar about the possibility of Circles being able to list, go for listing at some point in time. So I'm excited for your journey up ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Thanks for having me, and hey, thanks everyone for listening in.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning and listening in.